So if people aren't yet paying attention to Lebanon in Washington, I do think they need to start. And here, let me make my second point, which is that I think it's important that the administration quickly develop a real policy for Lebanon and the elections, and not simply a series of ad hoc measures that are more an adjunct, or at worst, an afterthought of what really constitutes an engagement strategy with Syria. Now, being as sensitive as we can be to Lebanon's own internal political dynamics and the role of the United States in that, I think we need to be carefully considering with key friends and allies all the steps we could take between now and June, both publicly as well as behind the scenes, to bolster our partners in Lebanon and to demonstrate to the Lebanese people that the United States and its allies remain strongly committed to standing up for Lebanon's independence and sovereignty, including the implementation of key UN resolutions like 1559 and 1701, and strengthening the main institutions of the Lebanese state, particularly the armed forces. And while this is a trickier proposition, I also think we need collectively to at least think about the kinds of messages we might send to the Lebanese public about the potential consequences, at least for American policy, should they choose to put in control of their government and their economy a group that, at least in the case of the United States, we still consider a terrorist organization and an extension of the Iranian Quds Force. Of course, even if we decide in the end that it's too risky or counterproductive to deliver those kinds of warnings before the elections, the administration could still well face the reality of having to deal or not deal with a Hezbollah-led government after the elections. And here, if you like the original movie in Gaza, you're going to love the sequel in Lebanon. Now, with respect to U.S. policy toward Lebanon, let me also note the importance, I think, of ensuring to the extent we can that we and some of our key friends and allies, particularly the Saudis, Egyptians, French, and British, are on the same pages to the extent possible. In a slightly different way, I think it's also important that we and the Israelis have some kind of understanding about our objectives in Lebanon, none of which I think will happen without very aggressive U.S. diplomatic leadership. From a personal perspective, I've been on the receiving end of both French and Israeli diplomatic initiatives that, however meritorious they arguably might have been at the time, they clearly took advantage of some significant holes in U.S. policy that were created, unfortunately, I think, by a lack of real strategic purpose and coherence at times in the Bush administration's policies towards Syria and Lebanon. So it's my strong view that U.S. objectives in Lebanon simply will not be well served unless the U.S. is strongly leading the way and that we have a sense of where we're going. And in this context, I do hope Andrew mentioned that the administration is in close consultation with the Saudis regarding the recent rush to reconcile with Syria. I, for one, am not sure that's the case. I certainly don't feel like I have any kind of full understanding of just what the Saudis are up to, why they're doing it, and what exactly it means for an array of issues where U.S. interests are deeply engaged and could be affected, Lebanon included. Now, what I can share is my own experience with Saudi King Abdullah during the time that I worked for the Vice President. And that is that in the wake of the Hariri assassination, especially after President Assad's half-man speech, this kind of dramatic reversal of the Saudi posture towards Syria would have really simply been unthinkable for the king. And it's something, in fact, that he vociferously counseled the U.S. against on more than one occasion over the last few years. Now, I'm speculating here, but I cannot help believe that this particular Saudi initiative, therefore, has been undertaken not so much in consultation with the new administration, but surely with an eye on the new administration. And in particular, I think its determination to make the centerpiece of American strategy in the region engagement with people who, at least up until now, King Abdullah and the Saudis have viewed as their main regional opponents. The third point I want to make is that people in the administration need to be very sensitive to the ways that U.S. engagement with Syria can indeed affect the outcome of Lebanon's elections. And personally, I think a lot of the risks are on the downside here. Lebanon is a society, in fact, poised on a razor's edge. Significant block of people, I think, particularly in the Christian community, almost certainly sitting on the fence, trying to figure out which way the wind is blowing, prone to conspiracy theories, not wanting to be caught on the losing side of this particular argument. And under those circumstances, I think even the whiff of a perception that the U.S. is in any way, shape, or form, again, ready to sacrifice Lebanon's independence on the altar of a deal with Syria could, at least in a close election, be quite decisive in pushing things in the wrong direction. And you can be sure, I think, that for its part, Syria will seek to do everything possible to exploit U.S. engagement for exactly that purpose. In that context, I think, I don't know if this is the same article that Andrew was referring to, but you've got to read a remarkable analyst issued by a commentator who also is very close to the Assad regime, who I thought it was February, wrote that, quote, "The new Obama administration knows that the plans of the previous U.S. administration have been defeated and that Syria played the primary role in ensuring that defeat. Syria is not in a hurry to pick the fruits of its policies. It is up to the defeated to present his menu and up to the victor to present his demands," close quote. Now, this may all sound quite crazy or odd to our ears, but I think, especially in the context of what at least a lot of people see as quite a dramatic U-turn in U.S. policy from one of isolation to engagement, that this kind of narrative of Syrian strength and American weakness, with America now sort of marching to Damascus on something of a bended knee, that's the kind of narrative that I do think has some resonance in regional lines, unless it is aggressively countered by the United States. Accordingly, I think it's absolutely vital the administration's engagement with Syria be pursued with acute sensitivity to the Lebanese context. To its credit, I think the Obama team has done a really admirable job so far of balancing its outreach to Damascus with a strong effort to reassure our Lebanese friends. Very strong statements of support by both the President and Secretary of State prior to the 4th anniversary of Hariri's assassination in February. Reaffirmation of America's commitment to the International Tribunal, including another $6 million of support for its operations. Administration went out of its way when these flood of congressional delegations were heading to Damascus to ensure that they had Beirut on their itineraries as well. And then, as Andrew said, the first high-level American envoys to Syria in almost 4 years included Jeff Feltman, who more than any other person in the U.S. government has been identified with the struggle for Lebanon's independence and deep skepticism of Syria, and another Dan Shapiro, who I know helped draft the Syria Accountability Act.